Draft class and undrafted free agent crop is in the books. What do next steps look like for this football team? We're exploring some dynamics at play here on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, and the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. We are today on the show looking at what's next. The draft is in the books. The Dolphins attacked the trenches with gusto, right? They were very eager to add mass physicality and youth to the trenches. A welcomed addition, a welcome change for the Miami Dolphins, but the work is not yet done. The calendar has flipped to May 1st, which means we're about a month away from when the coveted June 1st window comes across. And when the June 1st window comes and goes, any players that are moved and traded off of a team, franchises are then able to split whatever dead cap commitments they have for money paid in past seasons against multiple years of the salary cap. It's whatever that year's original scheduled commitment is, and then all future years goes into the next year's salary cap bookkeeping. This is very relevant for Jalen Ramsey, who the Dolphins traded for, acquired, gave a new contract, and within 18 months of acquiring said player, gave said player another new contract. And apparently the relationship between Ramsey and Mike McDaniel has deteriorated to the point where there is a large expectation that Jalen Ramsey is not going to be with the Dolphins football team any longer. And it's really just a matter of finding the right trade partner. And for the Dolphins and their perspective, does the timing of this matter, or is this the next thing that has to happen for Miami? And the answer there is no. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to pull up overthecap.com, but we'll talk through all of these numbers as they're relevant to what we're talking about here with the Dolphins. Overthecap.com has the Dolphins' current salary cap space sitting at about $16.5 million. If you were to move on from Jalen Ramsey, you will lose salary cap space. If you were to trade him pre-June 1st, you're looking at adding about $12.5 million more in cap commitments because all of the prorated money from when he was first added to the team to this past year when he got a big cash and they spread it out when they reworked his contract. He's already received a $4 million roster bonus in the here and now for 2025 compensation. All of that would hit because it would be moved pre-June 1st. So if you were to trade Jalen Ramsey pre-June 1st, his salary cap hit would go from $16.6 million to $25.23, but then you have to add the $4 million roster bonus that they've already paid him. So it's really $29.213 million. That would send the Dolphins from having $16.5 million in cap space to having about $4 million in cap space. And that's before you sign your rookie draft class. So you do need to be wary. I find it very difficult to believe that the Dolphins are going to get the sweetheart offer in the next 30 days now that the draft has come and gone and they didn't get an asset in which they felt was encouraging to move Ramsey in that first window where you would get something that would help the team this year. I'm inclined to believe that they're going to wait because you would lose that extra $12.5 million in cap space. And while it's fair to point out, you could restructure Jordan Brooks' contract and save almost $6 million in cap space. And you could restructure Aaron Brewer's contract and save $4 million in cap space. And you could restructure Alec Ingold's contract and save $1.5 million in cap space. And then do Jason Sanders's and save almost $2 million in cap space. Like, you could restructure those guys and offset what you lose from moving Jalen Ramsey. So it's not prohibitive of you doing anything that you want to do. But what incentive is a team going to have that's going to give you the tipping point offer in the here and now? I just don't see it happening. And therefore, I think it is far more likely that Ramsey at this stage gets moved after June 1st. Now, again, you can offset the lost cap and then obviously save yourself the cash that you would owe Jalen Ramsey at any point. So I wouldn't say that it's prohibitive from doing any move that you want to do. And the Ramsey situation lingering, they have the levers they need to pull, where if you want to sign, hypothetically, Rasul Douglas now, you can sign Rasul Douglas now. And then if that opportunity comes to trade Jalen Ramsey, you could trade Jalen Ramsey and then restructure those contracts and put that salary cap space back on the books. But the dynamics obviously do change if Ramsey's moved after June 1st, and you can split the commitments across this year and next. Now, that's also equally applicable to number 10. I don't think the Dolphins will move number 10, but it's been something that some fans have fantasized about since the moment he pulled himself off the field and refused to play, and then had the audacity in the locker room to complain about not getting 1,000 yards because he didn't play the second half of a game. That's neither here nor there. We're going to talk a little bit more about the post-June 1st flexibility, why that probably is leaning towards when the Ramsey stuff happens. And we'll get into that and then start to look at some free agents that make sense for the Dolphins next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. There's nothing quite like the atmosphere of a playoff game. Every bucket, every goal, every stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without all of the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off or puck drop, and last-minute deals can help save you 60% off, but not just on sports. It's also concerts, comedy, theater, more, you name it. And with their all-in pricing, there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets with the lowest prices, guaranteed. So what happens? First of all, let's tackle the rookie draft class. Based off where the Dolphins made their picks, only the first two draft selections, that of Kenneth Grant and Jonas Avanaya, are going to impact the Dolphins' salary cap space until they get to a 53-man roster cut, because it's only the top 51 players count against the cap. Jonah's cap hit is going to be about actually have this. Let me pull it up. Make sure we're speaking authentically here and get the exact numbers right. So this is on my numbers that I have. According to the overthecap.com rookie wage scale, the 37th overall picks year one cap hit is $2.05 million. The cap hit that would be bumped off as like the 51st that would be removed is about $1 million. I believe that name right now is Malik Washington, whose salary cap hit is 1.009. So it's about $1 million more. So you'll lose $1 million in cap space for top 51 when you sign Jonah. And then Kenneth Grant is just under $4 million. That's 3.22. So you'd lose about $3 million there. So it's $4 million of cap space, top 51, to sign the entire draft class. So that's another piece of the moving jigsaw puzzle of over the cap has the Dolphins at $16.5 million in cap space, but you're potentially losing money if you trade Jalen Ramsey, but then you have restructure potential, and then you have to account for the rookie draft class. A lot of moving parts. And it's really the timing of it's going to be fascinating for what ends up happening first. I could tell you the NFLPA puts out an existing or a daily salary cap report. And the NFLPA actually has the Dolphins at 17.3. So about $800,000 more than what over the cap has for the Dolphins. So depending on where you look, you'll see different numbers. It's about $17 million in cap space that the Dolphins currently have. And that should help you rest easy that this can go any number of ways. But for the Ramsey discussion, if Ramsey's moved post June 1st at this stage with what the current salary cap situation looks like with the roster, the cap charge, and remember, whatever number I'm going to give you here from over the cap, we're going to add $4 million to it because they've already paid that option bonus. So the cap charge would go from $16.66 million, which is what it is right now to carry him on the roster, to $6.745 million plus the $4 million roster bonus they paid him in March. So it's about $10.75 million. So they'll save close to $6 million this year. But then in 2026, Ramsey will carry an $18.5 million dead cap charge, not dissimilar to what happened with Xavier Howard, because Howard was off the team last year. And then that was a post-June 1st designated cut. So this year, the rest of Howard's prorated money is due in 2025 for cap purposes. And that was $15.7 million in dead cap for 2025 to get rid of Xavier Howard in 2024. Right. So it's that cycling of expiring contracts or contracts for players that you're moving on from and kind of making sure you're not getting too bottled up with too much of cap commitments to players who aren't on the team and weren't on the team last year. And that's kind of the awkward intersection that the Dolphins are going to have to go through with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey, and Teron Armstead's going to be part of this conversation because he's still technically on the books. Now, in a month, or I guess I should say a month and 1 day, they can process Teron Armstead's retirement. They're going to carry him until June 2nd at least, and then process his retirement so that the prorated money from that's due this year and into future years against the cap doesn't all accelerate, because if you're retired, they treat it for cap purposes just like your cut. If it's after June 1st, you could split it. If it's not after June 1st, it's before June 1st, you have to hit it all in one shot. So the Dolphins would lose cap space if they process Teron Armstead's retirement right now. So when that's all said and done, they'll save $1.25 million in cap space for this year. But then in 2026, they're going to carry for Teron Armstead another $10.7 million in dead cap. So between Ramsey and Armstead combined, if they're both post-June 1st designations, you're looking at almost $30 million in dead cap for those two players by themselves. And that's before you do Tyreek Hill, where, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. You're probably going to be having $50-60 million in dead cap next year. Now, teams last year made the playoff. There was a half of the teams that were over $50 million in dead cap last year in the NFL made the playoffs. Sometimes it's better to take your medicine in that regard, get more cost control players, sign some new players and bump them out is kind of the next cycle of the team, which is what the Dolphins are in the process of doing right now. Don't look now, but the Dolphins last season were one of the oldest teams, if not the oldest team in football. I know, especially on the defensive side of the ball, for the percentage of snaps that were taken by older players. The Dolphins, according to SpotTrack, are currently tied for the 5th youngest roster in football. They still have to sign their draft class, and their draft class was the youngest draft class in football. Youth movement is underway, and that you should expect some growing pains with, there will be some frustrating lapses, and the overall success of the team, I think, is a little bit more, it's going to be more difficult to project the variance of outcomes that the Dolphins could experience this year because of that youth movement. But that's only going to be further compounded when the team ultimately moves on from Jalen Ramsey. So who are some names that might make sense at this stage post-draft? Dolphins didn't make any signings or didn't make any picks at cornerback other than Jason Marshall at the 5th round at 150 overall. Kind of disenfranchised a lot of pundits around the Dolphins draft class. Here's the top names as it pertains to percentage of snaps played last season at the cornerback position. Rasul Douglas, 75% of snaps for the Bills last year, 31 years old. Stephon Gilmore, 66% of snaps last season, 35 years old. Both of those guys, their previous contract was an average of $7 million per season. I think that's probably the same general ballpark that both of those guys should expect to sign their next deal in, maybe a little bit cheaper. Mike Hilton, 65%, nickel player, 31 years old. Shaq Griffin, Minnesota, 50.5% of snaps, 30 years old. You get past that group. Asante Samuel Jr. is a big name, but a name that has some durability questions. Is probably looking for a big payday coming off a rookie contract. He's 26 years old, so like the youth element is there. But now you're into names like Darryl Worley and Jalen Mills and Cam Sutton and Troy Hill, Michael Davis, Miles Bryant. I'm trying to find upsell players at this juncture. For me, it's probably Rasul Douglas, Stephon Gilmore, Mike Hilton, although I think he's a nickel. He's a great player. Mike Hilton's an awesome player, but he is a nickel. And I think the outside viability there is in question. So it doesn't leave you with a lot of answers for who's playing outside. And then the player that you have as an unquestioned talent is a guy who a lot of people perceive to be better inside anyway, in Kader Kohou. So I think that Rasul Douglas pairing is one that makes a lot of sense. I would be, and I believe Barry Jackson's reported that they've been in contact. I would assume that one gets done. That's the move I'm assuming happens. What about elsewhere on the roster? I don't expect between what moves they made to draft more safeties that they will add a safety in free agency, but there's some safeties that make sense. Names that I like that I think could potentially be a safety too. I would include Julian Blackmon, 27 years old, played for $3.7 million last year. I've been asking for the Dolphins to sign him for 2 years. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a name that I would be remiss to not invoke. I don't think Justin Simmons makes a lot of sense. 32 years old, played for $7.5 million, aging player, probably wants to compete. Wanted to compete last year and chose to go to Atlanta. It didn't work out too well. I would imagine he's going to take a low-hanging fruit team to play for somebody competitive. Quandre Diggs, it's kind of same boat. He signed in Tennessee. That ended up being a disaster. Jordan Whitehead was in a car accident. There's some an injury recovery from a car accident that he had last season. But he's 28 years old, kind of in the $4.5-5 million ballpark. Played 2/3 of the snaps for the Bucs last year. I think he's a good player. So there's a couple players I think you could tie together, but I don't think it's anything that's going to change the overall temperature of the room. And they have a bunch of young guys there. You know who I didn't mention at corner, and I can't believe we have to have this conversation. Can we stop with the Xavier Howard stuff? Can we please stop? He was very clearly breaking down in 23. Didn't play last year. Had a couple of workouts for teams that desperately needed corners. Didn't get an offer. Had more off the field nonsense going on. Like ugly stuff too. How old is Xavier Howard? 31 years old. He's going to turn 32 and didn't play last year. Can we stop? Just it's forgetting Sarah Marshall. It's over. Find a new show. Stop asking about Xavier Howard in the year 2025 to fix your cornerback problems. Please. Please. Although there may be some players who played last year who might be of interest, but they may be under contract from other teams. There's one name that's been rumored. We're going to talk about that name next here, Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with a Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play, and you're ready to go. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. What if you could just jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console? It makes it easy for you to game on the go. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including the Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and the Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. I didn't mention offensive line. I do think you probably need a name here. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the week. I don't think the big names are going to be chomping at the bit with the investment that you made. Like Jonas is going to be a starter, and you're paying James Daniels $8 million per season. He's going to be a starter. Aaron Brewer, I'm surprised, still has his fair share of naysayers. Was very good in the scheme last year. He's going to be a starter, and he's getting paid starter money at center, competitive starter money at center. Patrick Paul was a second-round pick last year, and Austin Jackson's on a second contract. That's your starting five. And while they've overhauled the guards with a couple of 325-pound maulers, and then added another utility player that has run blocking prowess in the way that Larry Borum does, you're probably going to want one more piece. But like Brandon Scherf's probably not going to sign here. Age 34. He played 98% of snaps last year, and he also played for $10 million. I don't think that intersection, and that was part of the argument for, look, with the needs that you had, just kind of let the board play itself out in the draft and then go sign some players, right? Like, because if you'd have signed Brandon Scherf before the draft, you'd have said, well, we paid Brandon Scherf probably close to $10 million to play here. He's going to play right guard, so let's not go get a player in Jonah that we think can be a long-term answer for us. That has its pros and cons. It has its risks and it has its rewards. The risk in the way that the Dolphins chose to play it is the free agency list is whittled down, but there's a clear group of players who is still uncommitted on the offensive line. It includes Daniel Brunskill, makes a lot of sense. Will Hernandez, potentially, player coming off of an injury, but would be a nice add, but not a lot of position flex there. Cody Whitehair, I think, is another name that's at least worth invoking to some degree. Joe Noteboom, we've mentioned on the show as well. Feliciano would have been a great signing, but is retiring. The player that's been rumored to Miami or to be available via trade is Greg Newsome from the Cleveland Browns. This is what will be a fifth-year player. He was a first-round draft choice in 2021. He's going to turn 25 years old in 2 weeks, playing on a fifth-year option that is valued, it's about $13 million for Greg Newsome. And it's fully guaranteed because it's the fifth-year option. What perks my interest about this one, and he's a Rosenhaus client, that in and of itself makes it more likely than a David Mulligetta client, just because the Dolphins have not had good luck with Mulligetta clients recently. But if the Browns are serious about continuing to pool more draft capital for future years, specifically for 2026, after they moved out of drafting Travis Hunter and picked up an extra one next year from Jacksonville. So they're kind of stocking up, right? They're a team that's been top 3 in the NFL in cash spending every year since 2021. You're looking at a corner who you might not be able to pay. And every time I say, well, they're not going to be in a position to pay him, they keep finding ways to pay new players. But they've got $19.5 million tied up in Wyatt Teller in void money for him to not even be on the roster in 2026. It's probably worth their time to re-sign him. Judy got an extension. Conklin's got multiple years left on his deal. They still got the Deshaun Watson albatross of a contract to tackle next year, where they could probably play it out if they wanted to. But the mechanics of that are kind of tough. On the defensive side of the ball, they made the recommitment into Myles Garrett. There's not a ton of flexibility there. Dalvin Tomlinson's on the books in a contract year in 2026. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, dealing with an injury, has multiple years left on his deal after this year. They're scheduled to pay Denzel Ward $30.5 million or have a cap charge of $30.5 million for Denzel Ward in the secondary already. They paid Grant Delpit. Like they've got some commitments. And you saw it happen with the Saints and Alontae Taylor, where Alontae Taylor left in free agency and signed for $18 per because they couldn't afford to pay him because they were so backlogged to just get cap compliant. The Browns are kind of in the same boat. So what would be interesting to me is, and I don't love the idea of trading an asset for a player, but you now do have 2 3s. You're projected to have 2 4s, courtesy of Javon Holland. And Emmanuel Agba's contract details just came through this morning. The base on that contract is $3.25 million. That should be enough to be a qualifying contract for the Dolphins as a loss to position them to have a net -1 for comp free agents gained and lost, which would mean the Holland pick qualifies and they would get a 4 for Javon Holland. So you're living in a world where you might have 2 3s and 2 4s as the Dolphins with surplus draft assets. Would the Browns play ball at that ballpark? Like, I think Greg Newsome's a good enough player that if you wanted to add a corner that you feel like isn't going to command Ramsey money, but would be worth a second contract and a premium pick and a guy who's played 4 seasons and might be available for trade to kind of in an unorthodox way get you back on board to have another option at corner, it's a name that's worth investigating. And I certainly like the appeal. He's played more snaps outside than he has in the slot. So all of the things that we talk about with Kader Kohu, the things that we talked about that we liked with Jahdae Barron, Greg Newsome brings some of that to the table. Now, he had some penalties the last 2 years. He had the dip in ball production where in 23, he had 2 interceptions and 11 passes defense. That number got cut by 33% or by 67%. It was only 1/3 of the ball production last year, but that Browns defense was bad. I would at least be calling if I was Chris Grier. I'm not guaranteeing that and I don't know how much I would love sending a 3 for Greg Newsome. If you could do a pick swap, maybe one of the 3s would be on the table. Can't imagine that the Browns would want to onboard any of your older or expiring contracts or older players that you're trying to offload yourself. Maybe the domino effect is when you move Ramsey, you get even more draft capital, whether that's a 5. I would hope you'd get a future 5. To flip Ramsey at this stage because you're putting off the ROI on the pick by a year. We'll see. But I would be calling the Browns and I would be inquiring about Greg Newsome. And there's been all kinds of rumors. I don't have any tangible evidence of any of that's actually happening. But I would be calling if I were the Dolphins. kind of get creative here with this cornerback situation. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Thursday. We will be back again tomorrow. More Miami Dolphins talk coming your way. Hope to see you then. Go Fins.